In 2017, North Korea detonated a nuclear bomb so powerful it made a mountain collapse. Satellite images caught the whole thing. An entire section of rock just caved in on itself. Western intelligence thought they were years away from this kind of capability. They were wrong. Very wrong. Most countries have living presidents. North Korea has a dead one. Kim Il-sung died in 1994, but he's still technically running the show as the eternal president. I've covered a lot of strange political systems, but a necrocracy? That's a first. And this dead president's legacy includes some very real nuclear capabilities that caught everyone off guard. Back in 2006, Western intelligence agencies figured North Korea was maybe a decade away from pulling off a successful nuclear test. They were off by about 9 years. The country has conducted 6 nuclear tests since then, with their 2017 detonation being so powerful it actually caused the mountain above the test site to collapse. Satellite images confirmed it. An entire section of Mount Mantap just caved in. What really concerns neighboring countries, especially China, is that this test site sits only 60 miles from the Chinese border. There are legitimate geological concerns that continued underground testing could destabilize Mount Peak II, a volcano that's sacred to both North and South Korea. If that erupts, we're looking at a regional disaster. But here's where North Korea gets really interesting. They don't just build weapons, they build spectacles. The Rungrado First of May Stadium in Pyongyang holds the world record as the largest stadium, seating 114,000 people with capacity for 150,000. To put that in perspective, it's bigger than Michigan Stadium, the Rose Bowl, and Wembley Stadium combined. What they use this massive space for tells you everything about the regime. According to multiple defector accounts from the 1990s, a group of generals who attempted to overthrow Kim Jong Il were publicly executed there, reportedly by flamethrower, in front of tens of thousands of spectators. I should note that while these accounts are consistent among several sources, the North Korean government has never confirmed these executions. The same stadium also hosted something completely surreal in 1995, a professional wrestling event called Collision in Korea. Japanese and American wrestling federations somehow negotiated to bring their show to Pyongyang, billing it as a festival for peace. Picture this. Muhammad Ali sitting ringside in North Korea, watching Hulk Hogan and other wrestlers perform in front of a crowd that had probably never seen anything like it. The whole thing was so bizarre that even the wrestlers later said they felt like they were in another world. These days, the stadium primarily hosts the Arirang Festival, and I use the word festival loosely. It's actually a massive gymnastic performance involving over 100,000 participants, recognized by Guinness World Records as the largest coordinated display in human history. Children as young as 5 are selected for these performances, and once you're in, you're basically committed for life. The precision is genuinely breathtaking, but knowing that level of coordination requires years of intensive training makes it feel less like entertainment and more like a demonstration of state control. The festival disappeared for several years, then returned in 2018 with a new name, The Glorious Country. Subtlety has never been North Korea's strong suit, which becomes obvious when you look at their propaganda efforts. June 25th marks the beginning of what North Korea officially calls Struggle Against U.S. Imperialism Month. Yes, that's a real government designation. They've built an entire museum, the Sinchon Museum of American War Atrocities, that claims to document the deaths of 35,000 civilians killed by American forces during the Korean War. Historical records and multiple investigations by international organizations suggest these specific atrocities likely didn't happen as presented, but the museum remains a cornerstone of North Korean education about the outside world. The propaganda can get personal too. In 2014, Kim Jong Il described Americans as cannibals and homicides seeking pleasure and slaughter. Donald Trump responded by calling him Little Rocket Man. Kim fired back with mentally deranged U.S. dotard. Reading their official statements from that period feels like watching the world's highest-stakes Twitter feud. Then something unexpected happened. Kim invited Trump for a face-to-face meeting. North Korea actually took down anti-American propaganda posters around Pyongyang before the summit. For a brief moment, it looked like decades of hostility might shift. Of course, it didn't last, but it showed how quickly the narrative can change when it serves the regime's interests. One of the most persistent propaganda tactics is something called on-the-spot guidance, where Kim Jong Un visits farms, factories, and construction sites, usually followed by state television crews. These visits are completely choreographed. Workers are coached, facilities are cleaned and prepped, and Kim offers pearls of wisdom like work harder or this machine looks good. It's political theater designed to reinforce the image of a hands-on leader who cares about ordinary people. They've even created children's cartoons that portray Americans and Japanese as literal monsters trying to corrupt innocent North Koreans. But perhaps the most intrusive propaganda effort was a 2005 television program called Let's Trim Our Hair in Accordance with the Socialist Lifestyle. The show promoted specific government-approved hairstyles and claimed that long hair could deprive your brain of nutrients. Another program used hidden cameras to catch people with unauthorized haircuts, then publicly shamed them by broadcasting their names, addresses, and workplaces on television. The commitment to maintaining illusions extends to the border itself. There's a village called Ki-jong-dong that sits right on the edge of the DMZ, clearly visible from South Korea. On paper, it houses 200 happy farming families. In reality, it's completely fake. The buildings are just empty shells with no windows or interiors. It was built to make life in North Korea look prosperous and entice South Koreans to defect. Spoiler alert, it hasn't worked. Almost no one has taken a bait. I say almost because in 2013, 7 South Koreans actually did defect after sharing pro-North Korean content online. They thought they'd be welcomed as heroes. Instead, they were thrown in prison. One defector killed his wife in a murder-suicide pact. Another spent nearly 4 years in solitary confinement. When the survivors were eventually allowed to return to South Korea, they faced up to 10 years in prison there for their failed defection attempt. It's a tragic example of how people can get crushed between these competing systems. Back in North Korea, the government actively encourages citizens to inform on each other, especially if someone's caught watching foreign movies or listening to outside radio broadcasts. Meanwhile, tourists can visit the preserved body of Kim Jong Il, displayed in a glass case like a communist pharaoh. The mythology surrounding the Kim family gets progressively more elaborate with each generation. According to official North Korean biography, Kim Jong-un learned to drive at age 3. His father, Kim Jong Il, was reportedly walking at 3 weeks old and speaking full sentences by 8 weeks. The official record credits him with writing 1,500 books while in college and composing 6 world-class operas. Oh, and he invented the hamburger. North Koreans call it double bread with meat. Kim Jong Il could also allegedly control weather with his emotions. When he died in 2011, state media reported that lakes cracked, birds gathered to mourn, and snowstorms hit across the country. Totally normal meteorological reactions to political events. In 2012, North Korean archaeologists announced they discovered a unicorn lair just 200 meters from an ancient temple. The evidence? A rock with unicorn lair carved into it. Around the same time, Chinese state media picked up a satirical article from The Onion claiming Kim Jong-un was the sexiest man alive and published it as legitimate news. They were genuinely proud of the recognition. North Korea has also claimed to have invented hangover-free beer with 40% alcohol content. No independent verification exists, and the beer seems to have disappeared from public discussion shortly after the announcement. Probably for the best. Kim Jong-il had some peculiar personal habits that offer insight into life at the top. He was obsessed with rice quality, requiring female staff members to individually inspect each grain for size, weight, and color. The rice could only be cooked over wood from a specific mountain in China. When he was recovering from an injury and feared becoming addicted to painkillers, he forced his entire staff to take the same medication at the same dosage, apparently, so he wouldn't have to suffer alone. Here's something that sounds like a joke, but isn't. North Korean propaganda has long claimed that the dear leaders don't defecate. This was presented as evidence of their superhuman nature. That myth got a bit complicated when Kim Jong Un's travel convoy was discovered to include a personal portable toilet, and officials caught using it reportedly face execution. Over the decades, for American soldiers have defected to North Korea. The most famous was James Joseph Dresnok, who became a star in North Korean anti-American films, always playing the villainous American soldier. He died in 2016, and according to reports from people who knew him, he told his children to remain loyal to Kim Jong-un and to destroy the U.S. if it ever attacked North Korea. Imagine growing up with that as your family legacy. Finally, in 2010, North Korean media announced that Kim Jong-il had started a global fashion trend with his gray jumpsuit, which had supposedly left a deep impression on people around the world and was attracting their attention. I've looked, and I can't find any evidence of a worldwide gray jumpsuit craze, but I admire the confidence. What strikes me most about all of this isn't just the audacity of the claims, but how they reveal a system so isolated that it can create its own reality, and, for millions of people, that becomes the only reality they know. These aren't just quirky facts. They're glimpses into what happens when a government has total control over information, education, and even imagination. Whether it's unicorn layers or weather-controlling leaders, each story points to the same thing: a population living in a carefully constructed alternate version of history and science. And that might be the most unsettling fact of all.